Okay, this morning I'm going to be listening to some Steve Reich, and specifically his piece Different Trains for string quartet and fixed media. This is a Grammy Award-winning piece from 1988, which was commissioned by the Kronos String Quartet, and you can find a recording here on YouTube of the Kronos Quartet playing it. This is also a score video. It's a 3-movement work that's about half an hour long, and I saw this work live in 2018. It was a performance by the Bozzini Quartet at a music camp, you could say. Domaine Forget is this academy, a summer institute for musicians, and I was doing a composing workshop there, and I got to see the Bozzini Quartet play this. I think around that time I got my hands on this PDF of the score. This is a pocket score by Boozy and Hawkes. Steve Reich is a minimalist composer who was born in 1936. He's received many Grammy Awards for his work with his ensemble, the Steve Reich Ensemble. This is a percussion ensemble which started in 1966 and almost entirely has performed in New York and shaped New York's contemporary music scene. The ensemble steadily grew from 4 players to 18 players over the course of, I want to say, 8 years. It grew from 4 players to 18. So this was a very successful and lucrative group, and Reich not only performed in the ensemble but directed it and composed all of their music. So this is a very different way of approaching contemporary music compared to the academic model where your composing is a type of research and you have to gather the resources and funding to pay other people to play it who may have no working relationship with you. This is something entirely different where the gig or the performance is the genesis of the work. So there's a couple interesting things about the way that Reich uses electronics in this piece. He asks the performers to pre-record other tracks that will serve as their backing track. So this is very different from the Oliveira we looked at yesterday, where all the sounds were electronically generated. Here the sounds could just be played by other performers, but instead are pre-recorded by the ensemble, sort of like if you were laying down tracks in a studio. And he also has text featured, so he takes spoken word clips that have significance to the piece and turns them into melodies, which the ensemble mimics or plays at the same time, rather, so that you make, as a listener, this connection between the melodies in the ensemble and the text. The concept for this work is Steve Reich often took trains from Chicago to New York, for example, in and around the time when World War II was going on, and he was a Jew in America at a time when Jews were being trained off to concentration camps in Europe. So he's making this parallel and the recordings are all train related. So Virginia governess reminiscing about train trips, a retired Pullman porter reminiscing about his life, recordings of Holocaust survivors, and American and European train sounds. So a big theme in this also is looking back and reminiscing. So this is not supposed to be a piece from the perspective of Steve Reich as a child. It's from the perspective of Steve Reich as an adult thinking back to his childhood and trying to deal with history in retrospect. And he says it is both a documentary and a musical reality, and it's a new musical direction for him. So it's something like documentary music, video theater. That's the direction he's taking his music in. And certainly there's something very theatrical about it. He has a huge performance note here about how the quartet is supposed to record the backing tracks and how to like mix it and run it. A sound technician is required for a live performance, and he has details here about how to put it on a CD and play that CD from the stage. I think if people were to do this piece today, they wouldn't need a CD necessarily, but you have to imagine back in 1988, not everyone owned a laptop, so this was actually the more conventional way to do it. And here's a nice little diagram he has, right? You have a sound tech at the back of the hall, and he's sending information to monitor speakers for the performers and also to the house speakers. And it looks like there's some microphones here so that he can mix in the live sound with the electronics. Yeah, I think that's about it. You can see that a lot of this score includes the transcripts of the recordings, so these are the words you're going to hear. Very short clips, which are taken out of context, and it's not... It gives the listener a lot of room to think and imagine, and I think that's part of what makes the piece so successful. And this is like a minimalistic approach to text, you could say. Yeah, it's commissioned by Betty Freeman for the Kronos Quartet. My mistake. So the quartet didn't commission it, someone else commissioned it for them. And this was a premiere where the production of a recording was very important, and that recording went on to win a Grammy. So definitely thinking about music production as an important part of the composer's process. I'm not going to show too much of the score because this is copyrighted, but you can see that the way that Steve Reich has it laid out, the top 4 staves are the quartet that's playing live, and then there's 3 other recordings of the same quartet also written out. So it's almost like a little string orchestra. What the audience is going to hear is up to 4 quartets playing at the same time, one of them live, and I believe whenever there's text, Reich just writes the text of the recording underneath whoever has the melody, because every time there is text in this piece, it's matched by a melody playing at the same rhythm by either a live musician or somebody or some pre-recorded musician. Okay, with that, I am going to have a listen here, and I'll let you know what I think. I remember a lot about this piece from hearing it live and having to listen to it for various music history classes. So I'm a little bit familiar, but it's been a few years, and I'm going to try and really give it my full attention this time, listening to it with a score. This was a really pleasant listen, and I think one of the biggest things that was different about this listen was I was really paying attention to the distinction between the three movements, and the three movements are very different, not just in the text, the type of text that they set, but the second one really is very dark, and there's a little bit of the paradiddle figure in the third movement, but it's pretty much absent from the third movement, and I think that's another significant compositional decision, to have a lot more like imitative, melodic sort of textures in the third movement. I also found that it, when I first heard this piece, I knew there was more than one string quartet playing, but I had no idea it was four. And I think it's sort of this constant parallel motion between the four ensembles. It creates this sense that a lot fewer people are playing than you're hearing, right? All of the voices kind of meld together, so it sounds very light for the number of voices performing. I just thought that was an interesting sort of effect of Reich's style. It sort of diminishes the amount of voices you hear. And but in the third movement, that wasn't as much of a issue. Like, the third movement sounded very dense compared to the other two. I think this piece has a lot going on conceptually, and it does a really good job of connecting these disparate elements. For example, the literal text that's being recorded, and also the idea of recording text and storytelling, like relaying your memories through speech. And there was also this concept of a train, obviously, a train in motion and announcing its presence constantly with these like horns. And so there's like this idea of signaling, of moving from one location to the next, of chugging along. And then there was this paradiddle idea, which I think does illustrate the train pretty well, but also has like a militant connotation. Like, it's a percussion idiom. So I found myself imagining like a snare drum just constantly being hit. So I do think there is sort of like a military imagery there. Same thing with the idea of a siren. Like, yes, trains have sirens, but there's also a lot of military uses for sirens. So all of those elements sort of come together really well, I think. Even this idea of having a pre-recorded string quartet, or three of them, if, say, those parts were played by three more string quartets on stage, it would ruin the effect. Like, the piece's message would be less strong, because recording itself is one of the piece's concepts, right? So to have pre-recorded string quartet, it really emphasizes the fact that all of these things we're hearing, all of these texts are recorded in time, and they're not of this time. Same thing with the pre-recorded string quartet. It was pre-recorded. It was recorded before. It's not happening right now. It already happened. So I think that Reich put a lot of thought into that, and yes, a lot of these are compositional ideas that he's explored in other pieces, but I think here he really found a theatrical application for them that really works. Out of the three movements, I think the first one's my favorite. The way it goes from one text to another rapid fire. You can really hear in the first movement how the text is shaping the tempo, the meter, and the melody of the piece. And Reich does a good job of just laying out his process, his compositional process, right from the get go. And the second and third movement are beautiful too, but I think the first movement is the one that people really remember and associate with the piece. As far as minimalist pieces go, I think this is one of the best ones. Reich is a smart guy, and he's not. He doesn't take any of his own ideas lightly. I think he really pushes his ideas to as far as they can go, and this is a great example of that. And tomorrow we're going to be looking at something completely different. This is going to be another piece by Javier Torres Maldonado for string quartet and accordion. And in terms of style, it's going to be sort of the polar opposite of this minimalist trend from the 1960s through 80s.